I want to hear your story, Rose.
Rosanna McNulty is an elderly patient at the psychiatric clinic. She has been here for so long that no one exactly remembers why she ended up under involuntary treatment. Stephen Green, the new head physician of the hospital, became interested in Rose's medical history, who as it turned out took the life of her own son in the distant past. Of course, none of the clinic's patients know about this. Rosanna often reminisces about her little son. Dr. Green can't get over this story. Could a woman really be capable of such a thing? Sometimes Rosanna plays the piano. The medical staff is going to examine her before transferring to another institution. In the medical history, the patient's name is listed as Rosanna Florence Clear, but the woman says she is Rosanna McNulty, the wife of Michael McNulty. She still believes they have a son. Dr. Green explained to Rosanna that she cannot stay here for the rest of her life, so she will be transferred to another department. However, Rosanna declared that she would stay here until the end of her life. Soon a hotel will be built in this place, but Rosanna couldn't care less. The medical staff is preparing the remaining patients for transfer to another department. Just recently there were 9 patients, but Rosanna's friend passed away this morning. Dr. Hart explained to Dr. Green that Rosanna lives in her own reality and sometimes sees ghosts. Every day Rosanna walks through the hospital corridors and looks around. It feels as if she has been waiting for someone her entire life. The patients have been assigned to the cars. Dr. Hart personally ensured that each of them was taken care of. And Rosanna is the only one who won't be going anywhere. Green saw a letter addressed to Dr. Hart, with a personal request from the Archbishop's secretary, who wanted the renowned psychiatrist Stephen Green to study the medical history of Rosanna Clear. Rosanna was desperate and tried to stop the workers who were taking everything out of her ward. Seeing a truck outside the window, Rosanna rushed outside and stood in its path, asking the driver to return her belongings, which contained her entire life. Doctors Green and Hart came to handle the situation. Dr. Hart gave the patient a tranquilizer injection to calm her down. Stephen declared his intention to treat this patient. Dr. Hart considered it a waste of time but did not object, giving him until Friday. The nurse took Rosanna's diaries. Stephen instructed for Rosanna's belongings to be taken to her ward. Later, he visited the patient and asked how she was feeling. Nurse Kathleen was also present. Rosanna has been in the psychiatric clinic for almost 50 years. She only fears that if she is gone, no one will remember her son. Nurse Kathleen and Dr. Green asked Rosanna to tell her story. She began to read one of the diaries. This entry was from January 4, 1942. The lines were written in fear because Rosanna didn't know what lay ahead for her. Reading this, she couldn't hold back her tears. Rosanna had a carefree childhood. The father loved her very much and gave her music lessons. After his passing, Rosanna's mother went mad with grief and eventually ended up in a psychiatric clinic. The best thing in Rosanna's life was meeting Michael McNulty. She immediately knew she was ready to wait for him forever. Michael was a military pilot. World War II was underway, and the whole world united against the Nazi regime. One day while Rosanna was at the cinema, the bombing started. War came to Belfast, and Rosanna lost her job. This forced her to leave for the homeland. It was here that Rosanna first saw Michael. Rosanna began working at the sober hotel of her mother's sister, Aunt Eleanor. Life began to gradually improve. Aunt Eleanor was a very powerful and meticulous woman. Her cafe had strict rules. Although Rosanna was happy, the fighters over the city always reminded that the war was very close. The Air Force suffered losses in battles for air supremacy. One day Rosanna crossed paths with Michael McNulty, who sold tobacco and alcohol. He and Rosanna were opposites because alcohol was not sold in Aunt Eleanor's cafe. Michael said opposites attract. He is planning to leave for a while, but he really hopes they will meet again. McCabe witnessed their conversation and caught up with Rosanna on the road. They last saw each other at her mother's funeral. McCabe advised the girl to be more careful in choosing whom to associate with and sympathize with, the Irish or the British. According to him, the McNultys were always traders, not laborers. Of course, Rosanna didn't like this pressure. After some time, Michael found her in the city. Rosanna immediately realized that this guy was not like everyone else. However, he is not the only one whose attention was drawn to the beauty of Rosanna. One day Stephen Gaunt saw her bathing in the sea and approached her, saying that young ladies shouldn't swim here. But this time Gaunt forgives her for this transgression. Rosanna looked him straight in the eye, clearly indicating that she was not going to obey imaginary rules. Nevertheless, when Gaunt offered her a ride, she agreed because the way was not close. When asked about his occupation, Gaunt said he listens to complaints. Rosanna assumed he was a psychiatrist, but that turned out to be wrong. Gaunt refused to drive Rosanna directly to her home because the town was small and rumors could spread. Rosanna became curious about what he was hiding, and soon his secret was revealed. It turned out that Gaunt was a priest, highly respected in the town. Memories of Gaunt made Rosanna cry. The diary pages indicate that Rosanna did not harm her son, and she believes that one day he will come back for her. It was already night, but Dr. Green and Nurse Kathleen had no intention of going home, intrigued by the patient's story. All her life, she had been waiting for the son to come for her. In the past, Father Gaunt came to Aunt Eleanor's cafe, making her nervous. She ordered Rosanna to serve the priest. He, clearly interested in Rosanna, struck up a conversation with her. Rosanna is Protestant and Irish and makes no secret of it. Since then, Gaunt began to pursue her. Rosanna didn't know what to do, afraid to offend the priest with a direct refusal. The whole town started gossiping about the priest often giving rides to a Protestant. Aunt Eleanor, fearing for the reputation of her establishment, told the niece to avoid Father Gaunt and threatened her with dismissal. Near the church, Gaunt approached Rosanna again, but she simply walked past. McCabe continues to watch her closely as well. As promised, Michael found her. Rosanna watched as he circled in the sky in his fighter plane. And then he flew off to war. Most men in the town were rude. Of course, young Rosanna attracted many, but she turned them all down. Rosanna is determined to wait for Michael no matter what. In the present, Dr. Green reads Rosanna's medical history. Obviously, at some point, her beauty became her own worst enemy. In the past, a disco was held in the town. Father Gaunt couldn't take his eyes off Rosanna. When Jack Conroy invited her to dance, she agreed. The priest was angry and approached the couple, telling the guy not to be so close to the lady. This angered Rosanna, and she left. Outside, Jack caught up with her and confessed his love, but Rosanna didn't need it. Father Gaunt intervened again, ordering the guy to leave. Unable to stand it, Jack hit Gaunt. The priest responded in kind, then told Rosanna that she was tempting men. Rosanna made it clear to the priest that she wanted nothing to do with it. After this public scandal, Eleanor, whose hotel business was at risk, told Rosanna to pack her things. Rosanna doesn't realize her power over men. Now Rosanna will live alone in a house on the outskirts. Eleanor had no other choice. Rosanna's days pass in anticipation of her beloved. The radio reported that the offensive in France was over. Now people are wondering when the offensive on British soil will begin. And soon the worst happened. A battle erupted in the sky. Seeing a falling fighter plane, Rosanna felt that her beloved was there. She immediately rushed there. Upon the plane's crash, the pilot caught onto a tree and managed to survive. Cutting the rope, Rosanna saved him and hurried to take him away from there. Michael's detractors, led by McCabe, were already looking for him. The guy was wounded, so he had to lean on Rosanna. They hid in her house. However, McCabe and his men suspected that Michael was there and came for him. McCabe demanded Rosanna to tell him where Michael was, or it would be worse. Jack stood up for Rosanna, and McCabe had to back off. All this time Michael was hiding in the fireplace. Failing to find him, the men left with nothing. Rosanna is caring for injured Michael, who is hallucinating because of the fever. In the war, Michael, trying to save his comrade Tom, received a bravery medal. Soon Michael felt better. He shared with Rosanna that his friend Tom perished in the war. The plane caught fire. Michael tried to pull his friend out but couldn't. He was left with burns as a reminder of that. Now Michael feels a peacefulness that he hasn't felt in his life for a long time. The radio broadcasts about the heroic deeds of British soldiers in the war. Michael can't sit idle while his homeland is in danger. But before leaving, he first needs to fix his motorcycle, which will take some time. One day when there was a knock on the door, Rosanna told Michael to hide. At the door was the priest, who offered Rosanna to work as a housekeeper in his house. Rosanna coldly replied that she needed time to think. Gaunt clearly wanted to stay longer, but he had to leave. Finally, Michael managed to start his motorcycle. Rosanna thought he had left without saying goodbye, but then she saw the flowers left for her. In reality, Michael didn't leave but was fixing the roof of her house. During dinner as they chatted, Rosanna thought that she never wanted to part with Michael. He was her destiny. In the present, Nurse Kathleen and Dr. Green heard Rosanna playing her favorite melody on the piano again. She had once played it for Michael. The doctor and nurse understood everything without words. In the past, Michael invited Rosanna to dance. When Michael asked what she was thinking about, Rosanna replied that she was thinking about her mother, who couldn't bear the loss of the father. Now Rosanna is very afraid of losing Michael, but she promised to wait for him no matter what. The next morning, wearing his military uniform, Michael was preparing to return to the front. Before leaving, he left a cross for his beloved as a memento. However, Rosanna couldn't let him go just like that and asked him to stay at least a little longer. Passion arose between them. They were awakened by the sound of an approaching car. Telling his beloved to stay here, Michael looked out the window. Father Gaunt knocked on the door. It was a shock for him to see Michael in Rosanna's house. They said nothing to each other. Immediately after that, Michael proposed to Rosanna. Of course she agreed. The lovers didn't postpone their wedding and went to the church, where the pastor married them. Now they are lawful husband and wife. The spouses enjoyed these carefree days, although they knew it wouldn't last forever. One day when they returned home, they realized that someone was there. In a panic, Rosanna told her beloved to leave. She's a woman, so McCabe and his men won't hurt her, unlike Michael. They chased after him, while Rosanna kept shouting to her beloved to leave. Father Gaunt, harboring resentment, intended to do everything to ruin Michael and Rosanna's life. That's why he wrote a letter to her aunt. The nuns handed the letter to Eleanor. After reading it, she burst into tears. According to the priest, Rosanna led an immoral lifestyle. Eleanor, being Rosanna's only relative, signed it. In the present, Dr. Green and Nurse Kathleen noticed that the letters in the report were punched through. Father Gaunt was clearly angry and typing with all his might. Unexpectedly, Rosanna joined Stephen and Kathleen, saying that she didn't harm her son, others did. Now all Rosanna wants is justice. She has no one else, so she can only rely on Dr. Green and Kathleen. In the past, when the police arrived, Rosanna asked if they had found her husband. But the police weren't here for that. They were here to take her to the psychiatric hospital. Resisting, Rosanna was taken away, and later doctors explained to her that she was here at the request of her aunt and Father Gaunt due to immoral behavior. Rosanna doesn't understand why she is here and asked the doctors to find her husband. But since no one knows about Rosanna and Michael's secret marriage, doctors believe she made it up. After all, her mother was also creepy. Now this is Rosanna's new home. Strict rules are in place here. The medical staff do not tolerate disobedience from patients. When Rosanna refused breakfast, orderlies grabbed her, and a nurse, insulting the patient, began feeding her against her will. Rosanna spat the porridge right in the nurse's face. For this, the patient was subjected to electroshock therapy. Rosanna's life has turned into a nightmare. Now she eats whatever they give her without complaint. Upon hearing the sounds of an airplane, Rosanna ran to the window and saw a fighter jet in the sky. She doesn't know if her husband is alive. In the present, Dr. Green and Kathleen arrived at the place where, according to Father Gaunt, Rosanna committed her horrible crime. But was it really like that? Kathleen cannot imagine what it would be like to live locked up for 50 years. In the past, Father Gaunt visited Rosanna in the insane asylum. Rosanna didn't react to his presence in any way. Gaunt said that the aunt wouldn't come for her, but he also hinted to Rosanna that she could get married. Rosanna said she was pregnant, which came as a shock to both the priest and the medical staff. After that, Rosanna was transferred to another place. There were rumors among the nuns that the father of the child was Father Gaunt. In the Mary Magdalene shelter, under the supervision of the nuns, women who became pregnant out of wedlock work. Each of them will be separated from their children. Many American families adopt children from Britain, but Rosanna is not willing to give up her child. However, her opinion, of course, will not be considered. Most women never leave here because they are considered dishonored. The day of childbirth is approaching. Taking advantage of the unlocked door, Rosanna escaped. Father Gaunt chased her in his car all the way to the shore. Seeing no other way out, Rosanna entered the water and swam until she was exhausted. Police officers, along with Father Gaunt, pursued her in a boat. Rosanna swam again, hoping to hide among the rocks. Once on shore, she felt the contractions. When the officer asked Father Gaunt if he was the father of the child, Gaunt remained silent. He was very afraid of losing Rosanna. Meanwhile, she gave birth to a boy. At some point a terrible decision came to her, and she picked up a rock. Witnesses to this were Father Gaunt and the officers, who were horrified by what they saw. Unconscious Rosanna lay on the sand. In the present, Rosanna said that doctors took away her memories with electricity. Only the entries in the makeshift journals help Rosanna not forget everything completely. Dr. Green told the patient that he believes her. Everyone thinks she took her own son's life, but the truth is quite different. Exhausted Rosanna fell asleep. Later, Kathleen told Stephen that he really knows how to listen. When the nurse asked him to talk about himself, Stephen said that his mother was very loving, and his father was taciturn and emotionally reserved. There was always some understatement. Stephen learned to play the same melody on the piano as Rosanna. He often returns to the place where Rosanna supposedly committed her crime. In the past, Rosanna woke up again in the psychiatric hospital. Other patients consider her a monster, but the nurse on the contrary showed sympathy for the first time. Rosanna refused to believe that her son was not alive. She is certain that she could never harm him. Rosanna is regularly subjected to electroshock therapy, but this only aggravates her emotional state. Sometimes she sees Michael, who promises to take her home soon. Father Gaunt told Rosanna that Michael had perished, and it was done by McCabe. Hearing this, Rosanna burst into tears. The only person she loved would never come for her. Rosanna was sure that the priest was involved in this, so she attacked him, shouting that he was to blame for everything. Despite everything, Gaunt still has feelings for her. The orderlies had to restrain the unruly patient. Her days of confinement continued. In order not to go completely insane, Rosanna began to keep a diary, writing her memories over other text. Rosanna has come to terms with Michael's demise, but not the son's. It broke her heart. However, Rosanna believes that one day the son will come for her. Reading the diary, Kathleen cannot hold back her tears. Waking up Stephen, who has been staying overnight at workplace lately, Dr. Hart reminded him that tomorrow the last patient would have to leave. And Stephen's task is to convey this to her, to make it easier for her. Kathleen read the police officer's report, which caught Rosanna at the scene of the crime. But Kathleen believes Rosanna, not the police. Often Rosanna dreams of her son. She doesn't even know the exact date of his birth because there were no clocks or calendars in the child's home. Stephen was raised in a foster family, and no one knows exactly his birthday. It's either the 1st or the 2nd of May. Suddenly a shocking realization came to Stephen. Judging by the records, Archbishop Stephen Gaunt has something to do with this. At home, Stephen Green found his notary papers, which included a baptism certificate and old photographs. There was also a letter from the father addressed to Stephen. He decided not to sell his house yet and was going back to the clinic. Rosanna was ready to leave the place where she had been for almost 50 years, waiting for her son. And finally the son found her. Stephen gave Rosanna the letter in which his late foster father revealed the whole truth. It turns out Father Gaunt took Rosanna's son and handed him over to good people who adopted the boy, believing that his parents were not alive. But then the priest, who was actually a very unhappy man, told them the truth. In the letter was enclosed a medal of Michael, Stephen's real father, a very brave man. Stephen took Rosanna's hand, saying they were going home. Mother and son embraced. Watching this, Kathleen couldn't hold back her tears. So the family reunited. After 50 years of confinement, Rosanna found a son and home. The memory of Michael will always live in their hearts.